Hi, and welcome to another live streaming, chatting kind of a gaming video. And in today's video, I want to talk about console generations and where Nintendo fits in. So, I've been putting together some other videos just recently, and it kind of struck me that Nintendo are a bit of an oddbod when it comes to uh, generations of consoles. So, I'm going to go back as far as the fifth generation, which had the Nintendo 64, the original PlayStation, and the Saturn. That's pretty straightforward. The N64 there was technically, I think, more powerful than the other two. But that's besides the point. We move to the 6th gen, and you've got the GameCube, the original Xbox, the PlayStation 2, and the Dreamcast. The Cube didn't do very well. It's not one of Nintendo's success stories, but it's out of those four, it's the second most powerful console. So the Xbox there was something like a Pentium 3 733, I think it was, and the Cube was slightly behind that at 480 megahertz or 400 megahertz. The other two way down, and then it seems to just get a bit weird from the 7th gen, especially for Nintendo. Everyone else is pushing forward with high specs and there's bring out these shiny new consoles that are powerful. It's never really been Nintendo style. Even if you go back to the Game Boy age, the Game Boy came out. It was underpowered. It was really rubbish in comparison to what the competitors could do, like the Lynx and the Sega Game Gear. But Nintendo went for power. They went for price, and it sort of stemmed from there. When the Wii came out, the 7th generation of consoles, you had the Xbox 360 from Microsoft and the PlayStation 3. Big consoles, HD era, online stores, and all that. And then they brought the Wii out. Nintendo's competitor for the 7th gen was the Nintendo Wii, drastically underpowered. It was pretty much a glorified GameCube with motion controls. Didn't have HD. Processor easily a third of what the others had. And this is where Nintendo started to go with it. And I was putting together some videos, and I was just trying to fit where these consoles were in relation to each other. And you've got the Wii U, the massively ill-fated Wii U from Nintendo. This is the 8th gen, so it's in competition with the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4. And then you've got the Wii U. Now the Wii U really, well, it was more on par with the PS3 in power wise. It's nowhere near as powerful as a PS4, and it's where we get this huge jump. And you think, how can that be in the same generation if it's trying to compete? And it's trying to compete, and it's bringing out games on these systems that the games on the Wii, they brought some from the 360 and the PS3 across, even though the Wii was drastically underpowered in comparison. The same with the Wii U. Xbox One, PS4 games, some of those ended up on the Wii U. Not that the Wii U had many games. And that is 8th gen. And then you get to the Switch. Now, the Switch is a very odd console because most generations, they'll kind of release roughly at the same time. But technically, the Switch it's a 9th gen console. It's in competition with the Xbox Series X and the PlayStation 5, but they weren't released until 2022. The Switch was released 2017, midway through the 8th gen of consoles. So the Switch is more in comparison or in competition with things like the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and it just gets a huge jumbled mess. We've now got the Switch 2. Where does that fit? I'm assuming that becomes a 10th gen console, also then released halfway through the regular 9th gen era. So does the Switch 2, is that going to be a competitor to the PlayStation 6 and the whatever Microsoft are going to call their next Series X competitor? And it's an odd one. Nintendo are their own thing. They are winning the console platform. They have done for a while, even though they released underpowered consoles. They've always had a few in there that didn't do quite so well, like the GameCube and the Wii U. But the Wii, even though it was drastically underpowered, it was the biggest selling console of the 7th generation. Portable wise, exactly the same. Portable wise, Nintendo are definitely the king of handhelds, especially dedicated handhelds. Game Boy, massive success, even though it was poor in comparison. Game Boy Advance, well, no, well, that's just an extension of the Game Boy. We'll leave that. But you've got things like the DS, massively underpowered compared to the PSP, which is its sort of counterpart, but it still took over. And we're seeing that again with the Switch. The Switch may be a very underpowered 8th gen console that is kind of competing with 8th gen and now 9th gen consoles, and yet it's the biggest selling of its generation. So Nintendo are very, very odd. I don't know whether they deliberately just bring out consoles. I think they do. I think their strategy is that they're not going to be able to compete with the likes of Sony and Microsoft. They bring in these unique features, starting with like the DS with its touchscreen, the Wii with its motion controls, the Wii U's gamepad, the Switch with its hybrid side of it, the 3DS with its 3D screen. They don't go for broke. They don't go for let's bring out a console that is going to be as powerful as our competitors, because they have their own way of working their way into the game world. The Switch, it's probably on par with maybe a PS3. Even though it's an 8th gen console, it doesn't compete power-wise with the PlayStation 4. There are a huge amount of PS3 games that are ported over to the Switch. So even though it's an 8th gen dipping into the 9th gen, it's more like a 7th gen. And yeah, I mean, Nintendo, console generations, we've always had them. You can go back even further than that. You've got things like the NES competing with the Master System, the Super Nintendo competing with the Mega Drive, and well, they just don't compete. Nintendo do their own thing, and I don't really think we can carry on with this whole sort of generations of consoles, because consoles are now starting to be released out of sync. The Switch, I don't know whether the Switch came out earlier because of the failure of the Wii U, and that kind of knocked the generations out of sync, because the Wii U, well, if the Switch is a 9th gen console, that should have been released in 2020 along with the Series X and the PS5, but it wasn't. It was released 3 years beforehand in 2017. Yeah, 2017. It had a 3-year head start before Microsoft and Sony released their next console, and it's done wonders for the Switch. The Switch is, if I'm right, it's the second biggest selling console of all time. Let's see what happens with the Switch 2. But yet again, the Switch 2 is now released in 2025. We're not going to see a 10th gen competitor until 27, 28 with things like the PS6 and the next Xbox. Sony and Microsoft do seem to be keeping in sync with this, releasing their consoles at the same time. If we go back to the 5th gen, even then, the PlayStation and the Saturn were released pretty much the same time. I know that the Saturn had huge problems because Sega were worried about the PlayStation, so they suddenly rushed the release date forward to try and get ahead of the PlayStation, albeit by a few months. And yeah, 5th, 6th generations, yeah, they kind of did compete, but Nintendo then started to break away with the 7th. The Wii did not in any way compete power-wise with the 360 and the PS3. The Switch does not. Well, the Switch. No, sorry, the Wii U does not compete in any way with the Xbox One and the PS4, and the Switch does not compete with its Series X and PS5, but they are technically part of that. So, yeah, Nintendo are a law unto themselves, especially when it comes to releasing consoles, releasing games. They tend to go for a more of a family sort of friendly. They don't go for this let's cram in as much as possible. I've just had a message here. Nintendo have always been a generation behind on system power. Yes, I do agree with that, because the Switch being released in the 8th gen, but it really more competitive or competed with the games from the 7th gen, the consoles from the 7th gen. The same with the Wii. The Wii really was more on par with things like the original Xbox and the Cube than it was with the 360 and the PS3. So yeah, Nintendo have broken away. They've always kind of gone for this tried and tested technology rather than banging out the latest processors with RAMs, etc. And it does seem to work for them. Look at the success of the Wii. Look at the success of the DS. Let's ignore the Wii U. That's something else. And look at the success of the Switch. Yeah. So that was just a little rant. I mean, I said I was putting together some other videos, and I was looking up dates and facts and figures and whatnot, and it just kind of really threw me that some of these consoles, like the Wii, it didn't compete with its generation. The Wii U and the Switch didn't compete with its generation, and I don't think the Switch 2 is going to either. The Switch 2 can't even really compete with a Series X or a PS5, and that is not even its current generation. In a few years' time, when we get the PS6 and the Xbox Series X2, then the Switch 2 is going to lag seriously behind in terms of power. But it doesn't mean it's not going to be successful. Look at the Wii, look at the Switch, look at the DS. So yeah, just a little pointing out there that Nintendo don't really compete with its own generation or its own competitors in its generation. They do their own thing, and it does seem to work. Link, like, I hope you enjoyed this. Subscribe, enjoy.